Number 1.
A couple of weeks ago, my husband and I were road tripping across the USA. At 3 AM, we stopped at a rundown gas station in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska. By the middle of nowhere, I mean the middle of nowhere. The gas station was the only building in the area, and it was surrounded by empty fields. It was maybe 2 miles off the interstate. At 3 AM, it was pitch black outside, and the lights at the gas station were the only thing that illuminated the area. Since the gas station was closed, we were the only people there. My husband filled up the Jeep, and we spent a few minutes rummaging through our bags because I couldn't find my purse. After a while, an SUV pulled up right next to us. The driver was a white man in his late 20s or early 30s. At that point, I was sitting in the passenger seat and my husband was about to get into the driver's seat. The man approached my husband and said,
"Hey, I lost my phone out here. Have you seen it?"
Suddenly, a sense of dread filled the pit of my stomach as I noticed that he already had a flip phone on his hip. I studied his face. While he looked unassuming, there was something off about him. Something sinister.
"I must have left in that field over there,"
he said. The field was pitch black.
"Can you help me look for it?"
My husband already had his phone out with the flashlight on. He's such a good Samaritan. He started to follow the man. I then whipped out my phone and texted him, "Leave." My husband immediately saw the text and looked at me. I must have looked terrified because he ran, jumped into the car, and we booked it out of there. As we were leaving, I looked back and saw the man get into his car casually. We drove for about 20 miles on the interstate to a rest stop and slept there. After a short time, my husband woke me up and told me to look through the passenger side window. The man had pulled up right next to us. There were some empty parking spaces at the rest stop, and he still parked right next to us. The creepy part is that we parked at the very end of the rest stop, and the spot next to us wasn't even a parking space. We had our seats down to help us sleep, so he probably didn't see us in our Jeep. We quietly watched him get out of his car, take a look at our Jeep, and walk into the building, probably looking for us. As soon as he entered the building, we snapped our seats back up and hauled us out of there. We drove for about 50 miles and found a hotel about 6 miles north of the interstate. We never saw that dude again.
Number 2.
A couple of years ago, one of my closest friends relocated cross-country with his long-term girlfriend to work at a job he couldn't refuse. The only issue he had was that he did not want to fly his dogs out with him when they made the move, since they'd been staying in a hotel for the first few months. He was also a bit reticent to fly them out due to health concerns for both pets. By the time he located a home to rent, he was missing his furry buddies and made a request of his sister, another close friend, and myself to drive them to him in LA. Now, we are Chicago folks, so the trip would be a long one. However, with the three of us to foot the near 30-hour drive, it would be a piece of cake. We left early and drove long hours. Along the way, it was decided between my friend and I that we'd foot the majority of the drive ourselves, and if we needed to, we'd let our friend's sister do some driving. We were on a bit of a time crunch due to a snafu with the rental agreement, so we didn't have the luxury to stop very often past an 8-hour stay at a Denver La Quinta Inn, barring getting pulled over right before entering Utah for driving 2 miles in the left lane of an empty highway. From that point, we made it through Utah, Arizona, and Nevada without much trouble, until we entered California in need of gas. I had been driving for the majority of the first day and tagged my buddy in after being pulled over. I remained in the shotgun seat as a navigator, searching through the GPS for a fuel stop. We kept our eyes peeled for road signs and discovered a sign pointing to Yermo Ghost Town, or something along those lines, which had a mobile station. How wonderful. It was convenient too, as it was located almost directly off of the interstate. We rolled in on a little more than fumes when we approached the pumps. Normally, we let the dogs out at every stop, but having stopped not long before then, and with both dogs sleeping snugly in the back, I decided to pump gas without anyone else having to leave the vehicle. My buddy pulled us up on the opposite side of a beat-up green sedan, with a short, plump gentleman who just turned in to approach the shop. I noticed a few other hoopties at the pumps, all unoccupied, and there were a couple of other cars parked up near the station, most likely belonging to the employees, so nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until I swiped my credit card. The pump rejected my first swipe attempt, which I chalked up to a misread. I swiped again and the pump reads out, "Please see attendant." I was annoyed, but we needed gas. I tapped on the window and told my buddy what I was doing and asked if anyone needed anything. After taking their orders for Gatoroid and Marlboro Reds, I walked up to the store and made a mental note of how strange this gas station was. Kind of quiet, especially for one off the interstate, but that's no matter. As I walked in, more weirdness. First thing I notice is that there are some boxes of chips just left on the floor, like someone was stocking shelves and just quit. As I veered to my right, I noticed that immediately there is no one moving about in this place. With the 6 cars besides my own out there, I felt like I would see someone. Things got even weirder when I realized there was no one behind the counter. No customers or workers. And then it dawned on me. What had happened to the gentleman who was at the pump adjacent to mine? Surely they can't all be in the bathroom. This is where I begin to feel this gnawing sensation in my stomach. Something is just not right. I have always been a person who felt like I could trust my instincts, and those instincts were screaming at me to just get the hell out of there. I want to run, but I hold back. I would look suspicious booking it out of a gas station that was empty and decide to just play it cool, natural. Don't let your body language let on to how badly you are freaking out in your head. I was probably inside of this gas station for only a couple of minutes when I left, but I stopped just before exiting to listen for something. Anything. A flushing toilet would have been a good sound, but nothing. As I exit the shop and see my car, I begin to feel dread. It's like that moment in a movie where the hero is about to make it to the end of their trial, but the celebratory fanfare disappears, and in that silence, something comes and strikes them down. I'm about 25 yards from the car when I see this gentleman come out from around the side of the shop opposite of me. This is not the same man I saw when I was pumping gas. He was larger and had a peculiar look on his face. The best way I could describe it was like Nick Cage's smile from Face Off. I continued walking towards my car, but when I turned back to look at him, he was now walking towards me with a purpose. At this point, I noped my way back to the car with increased urgency in my step. And of course, my friend had the door to the car locked like a complete douche clown. There is also the 95-pound golden retriever sitting in my seat. Apparently, my travel companions did not notice how freaked out I was, or the creepy gentleman still walking in my direction. I punched the window and told him to unlock the door, to which he only half rolls down the window to tell me the dog was in my seat and they were afraid she'd jump out when I opened the door. I reached my hand in and threw the dog towards the back seat as hard as I could, while my friend is just now realizing how freaked out I am. He started the car and drove off quickly. I took one last look back to see Nick Cage had stopped about a pump away from where we were, still with that same look on his face. A strange, creepy smile. We found another gas station further down the road, this time with a ton of people inside and out. After thoroughly creeping out my friends with the story, I pumped gas and we made it our way back to the interstate, which meant passing that gas station again. It's been about 15 minutes since we pulled out initially, and we got silent as we noticed those very same cars are still sitting in the same spots where we had left them. After thoroughly freaking out for a few miles, I received a phone call from my credit card company about a $100 charge at Mobil Station. The lady on the phone was really helpful in fixing the situation for me, and was as entirely creeped out by the situation as we were. In the end, we made it to LA and had a great vacation, but it still bothers me as to what the hell was going on at this little gas station off of the highway, and what the hell were that smiling man's intentions.
Number 3.
Something bizarre happened to me last night, and I'd like to tell you about it. A bit of background on me. I'm an 19-year-old male living in a semi-large city in Ontario. It was around 11 at night, and I had just finished working out at the gym. I went to the grocery store to pick up some food for the next couple of days. Whilst at the grocery store, I decided to get $120 cash back, money that I owed my mum, and unbeknownst to me as I left the grocery store, money that I came so close to losing. Instead of going straight home, I decided to go for a little drive. I just got my car not long ago, and the novelty of driving stick hasn't worn off yet. After about a half hour of driving around the city, I decided it's about time to head home. As I pass a gas station on the edge of town, but close to my house, I decide that now is as good a time as any to pull in and fuel up. I pull in, and I'm the only one at the gas station. I'm in an industrial/business part of town, the edge, like I said, so there isn't much around. There is an empty lot that's without lights beside the gas station, and I notice an SUV sitting there, about 100 to 200 meters away. But I don't think much of it. I get out and start pumping gas when I notice a woman come around the corner and walk straight towards me. As soon as I noticed her, a shiver ran down my spine. I instantly locked my car. She walked towards me quickly, hands in her pockets, staring at me pretty intensely the whole time. "Hi, I got in a fight with my boyfriend, and he left me here. Can you give me a ride to my mum's house?" she said casually in her raspy smoker's voice. Another chill ran down my spine as she repeated the question almost word for word in that same raspy voice. I have to pump gas first," I said to her, keeping my eyes on her the whole time. She walked around to the passenger side door and grabs onto their door handle. "Can you unlock your car? I'm cold. I've been here for a while." "I have to pay for the gas," I said, deciding to cut the gas pumping short. I walked inside and talked to the guy behind the counter. I told him that the girl outside was kind of suspicious and I didn't know her. He just kind of shrugged, and I could tell he wasn't interested in getting involved, so I walked out. I figured she was high or something, but I would find a way to just get her to leave me alone. As I walked out, the SUV that I had mentioned earlier started up. I watched the driver maneuver himself so he could just drive out the exit. He stopped, engine still running. He was still like 100 meters away though. "Can you open the door now? I'm really cold." So many alarm bells were going off in my head already. First, she just looked sort of sketchy. She was dressed well enough, but her face was pretty rough. She was pretty covered in makeup, but it didn't hide a nasty looking sore on her lip. Her sunken eyes were dull, bloodshot, and just dead looking. Second, she didn't seem like a damsel in distress. Not at all. She didn't seem upset, and she spoke without much emotion. "No, that's not my problem. I need to go home," I said to her as firmly as I could. "Come on, you're driving me home, right?" "I can't. I have to get home right now." Searching for my phone, I realized I had left it in the car. "I'm cold. I've been out here for hours," she shouts, pretty angrily for someone who's asking for a favor, I thought. Then, I noticed her look at the SUV. I started cluing in to what was going on and raised my voice a bit. "That's not my problem." By now, I've reached the driver's side window. "I'm freezing. You said you were driving me home." "That's not my problem, okay?" I started to raise my voice, and she started raising hers. We weren't yelling, but it was getting a little heated. We went back and forth like that for a couple of minutes. My mind was racing. I thought about losing my car, about getting stabbed or shot, about getting robbed for the $120 I had in my wallet. I just lost it on her. "Get the fuck back. You don't know who I am. Get back right now." I guess I was in fight mode at this point. I was pretty much ready to just clock this bitch if she tried anything, as awful as that may sound. I think I caught her off guard or something because she stepped back right away. "You better get out of here right now then," she said, walking backwards. I instantly felt my balls tingle sadly and climb up inside me after what she said. I was out of fight mode and into flight mode. I watched her until she got a decent distance away, noticing she was walking sort of towards the SUV. I didn't watch for much longer. I hopped in my car and peeled out. I turned into a random subdivision, making sure I wasn't being followed. I called the cops and they said they'd send a car, but there wasn't much they could do because there was no real crime committed. But I did the right thing and she was most likely a bait for some kind of robbery. I drove home as quickly as I could.
Number 4.
This happened in the fall of 1993, when I was 20 years old. In the interest of context, this was before I started college, and I was working in the material prep department of a plastic factory on the night shift. I was the only woman in the department, and my male co-workers were initially skeptical that I could handle the job, but I proved myself and earned their respect. It was hard work, but on the plus side, it also put me in the best shape of my life. It was also about this same time that I dumped my abusive boyfriend. He was verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive, as well as an alcoholic. This fact, more than anything, is probably why I got myself into this situation in the first place. I had just gotten off work, and it was about 1:30 AM. My car was running on fumes, so I stopped at a local gas station to fill up. While I was pumping gas, a woman about my age approached me looking nervous and scared. She said that she'd been at her boyfriend's house and they'd had a fight. She walked to the gas station to use the payphone and call a friend to pick her up. On her way to the station, a car pulled up as she was walking and the guys inside started catcalling and harassing her. With a slight movement of her head, she indicated a car that was parked off to the side by the gas station dumpsters. I saw a large light green car, like a Caddy or a Lincoln, with at least 2 or 3 shadowy figures inside. She said they'd threatened her and she was too scared to call her friend and wait. The woman was neat, well dressed, and didn't seem high or drunk or anything like that. She just seemed really nervous and freaked out, so I didn't even hesitate. I finished pumping my gas and told her to hop in the car, that I'd take her home. At that time in a weeknight, there was little traffic, so I booked it right out of the gas station and asked her where she lived. She kept twisting around in the seat to see if the car was behind us, and when I asked her to put her seatbelt on, she ignored me and kept looking for the car. I assumed she was just scared. A few blocks down the road, however, I noticed that she was looking around the car and she started asking me about money. "Where's your purse? Where's your bag? I need money. You need to give me some money." My stomach sank. I have this woman in my car and now she's gonna rob me. Damn it. But when I thought about it, robbery just didn't make much sense. I was driving a 1985 Chevette and was wearing my work clothes, a ratty t-shirt and jeans with combat boots. I did not look like a person with a lot of cash, primarily because I wasn't a person with a lot of cash. She twisted around in the seat again and started yelling, "There they are! There they are!" She didn't sound scared anymore. I checked the rearview mirror, and sure enough, the light green car is right behind me. She started cackling and bouncing up and down in the seat. "My boys are gonna get you. They're gonna fuck you up." She's laughing like crazy, opening the glove box, looking in the back for a bag or a purse, telling me all the messed up stuff that these guys are planning to do to me. Now, if I had been smart, I would have just driven to the police station. Actually, if I had been very smart, I would have called the cops from the gas station and waited with her until they arrived. That would have been the intelligent thing to do. Unfortunately, none of this crossed my mind until later. In the moment, I just got really angry. I realized 3 things all at once. There was an intersection up ahead, with cars on either side waiting to cross, and the light had just turned yellow. I had a spare box cutter that I kept for work in the driver's side door compartment. The crazy woman still hadn't put on her seatbelt. I didn't think. I floored it and passed under the yellow light just as it turned red. I glanced back to see if the car was still behind me, but the cross traffic at the intersection had started to move, and they hadn't caught up. This woman started yelling. I slammed on the brakes and she hit the dash windshield with a solid and viciously satisfying crack. When she rebounded to the passenger seat, I had the box cutter in her face and was screaming some serious batshit crazy things at her. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was along the lines of, "Get out! Get the fuck out of my car before I cut your face and make you eat it." The crazy screaming and box cutter combo worked. She grabbed blindly at the handle and popped the door open, and I started shoving and punching her until she tumbled out of the car to the curb. I stomped on the gas, got to the next turn and squealed around it with the passenger door still open. I made a few more turns because I was afraid that the car might catch up to me. After a little while, I stopped to close the passenger door, and then I cut across town and got on the highway to go home. I was on the highway for about 5 minutes before the shake started. I pulled off to the shoulder to calm down and get myself together, and then I drove home. I told my sister everything that happened. She wrapped me in a tight bear hug while simultaneously yelling about how stupid I was for not going to the police. I've never been so glad to be yelled at in my life.
Number 5.
So, a little context to my story. I go to school to a private Catholic university in the downtown of one of the most dangerous cities in America, or it says so in most articles I've read. Next to my dorm, there is a little gas station that sells snacks and stuff. I go there pretty often because they sell Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and literally everyone needs that in their lives. It was about 1 PM and I was headed to my next class. I thought I would stop there and pick up a snack before class. I was waiting in line, holding my yogurt, and all of a sudden this huge guy, probably 6'5" and 250 pounds in his mid-20s, taps me gently on the shoulder and tells me my hair is beautiful. I'm somewhat used to this encounter because I have really long, naturally strawberry blonde hair. I smiled warmly and turned back around. Nothing about this man scared me. Out of nowhere, I feel a huge hand slide up the back of my neck and grab a fistful of my hair. The guy groaned and yanked back. I'm by no means strong or able to defend against this monster of a man, as I'm only 5'2" and about 130 pounds. I screamed and whipped out my pepper spray that was on my keychain. Luckily, the guy behind the counter dove over the desk and slammed him off of me. I was still in a weird state of shock. The guy who pulled him off was super kind and made sure he left before I went inside. Weird things have happened to me living down here. I've been in the city for almost my whole life, but never this physical and in broad daylight.
Number 6.
A little over a year ago, I worked at a gas station. It was one of those 24/7 ones with a mini-mart in it. and I worked the evening shift between midday and midnight. Now, I saw and dealt with a lot of messed up things in that store, which just led me to roll my eyes when people were doing or saying something creepy, wrong, aggressive, etc. Hell, if I had $1 for every time I was threatened with death, I could retire. One night, I was out in the store restocking shelves when one of the creepy regulars came in and started talking to me. He was a full druggy redneck. He would have been in his 50s, and he was tweaking whilst hitting on me. By this point, working in that festering hellhole, I had just learned to deal with it. Don't ignore them, they get angry. Don't act interested, they get clingy and sure as hell do not agree to do anything. He was saying some messed up stuff, something about what he wanted to do with me. I zoned in and out of what he was saying. It wasn't uncommon for him to ramble about perverted acts and other gross things. I tell him I have to get back behind the counter because my coworker needs me to make a coffee for a customer. He was a bit irritated but said he would talk to me later and then left the shop. After making coffee, I had to restock drinks. But the day team hadn't emptied the trolley of boxes, so I, albeit begrudgingly, took out the boxes to the big bin. This bin is located around the side of the store. There are no cameras, and the people inside can't see out to it. That used to make me nervous, but I had been there longer than some of the people who had just come through, and I was used to the environment. As I was throwing the boxes in the bin, the tweaking guy from before comes up to me and grabbed my arm. I tried to play it off like he was goofing around by laughing and saying something along the lines of, "Hey Fred, I know you like me, but you can't get all touchy-feely on me, alright? The husband will get mad." Sounds like I wasn't trying much, but with people like him, it was best to remain friendly with his type. The last time someone was more firm with him, they got knocked out by his right hook, and I was the lucky girl who got to witness it and call the cops. By this time I have stopped smiling and am now terrified. He shoves me against the bin and goes to unbuckle his belt, when glass smashed. One of my more favourite customers was across the road at the pub and had seen him go straight for me, and knowing his reputation wanted to make sure nothing bad was happening. And when he saw what was happening, he smashed his bottle of beer over his head. Cops were called, and I didn't see him again. As for the guy who saved my ass, so to speak, I gave him free coffee for a month. As for the boxes, I refused outright to take them out anymore. My co-worker did it instead. He traded me for cleaning the restrooms.
Number 7.
It was a normal day, almost like any other. I was spending the day with my grandmother, and I was around 10 years old at the time, and enjoyed getting out of the house and spending one-on-one time with her. My mother was very poor, and I was a middle child with 2 brothers. I never had alone time other than with my grandmother from time to time. I relished alone time with my grandmother because she would spoil me with letting me get a soda every time we went out of town. This was a little treat my mother never let me have. I'm very pale, a female with jet black hair. My mother is Irish, and my father is Cherokee Indian. I've always received growing up comments about how my dark hair and eyes pop with my pale Irish skin tone. I was very tiny at that age and petite. My grandmother would always hand me money for gas, then $1 for a soda. I had been into several gas stations before. I always felt important telling the cashier what pump we were at, and buying my own soda like a big kid. As I was rushing to get in that day, I had a weird feeling. My grandmother gave me the usual money to give to the cashier and was chatting on her phone while I ran in. Till this day, I don't know what it was that alerted me. There was this Hispanic man that was standing at the corner of the entrance. He looked really dirty, and I thought he might be homeless. He had old faded jeans on, with what looked like some type of black oil on them. His shirt was halfway tucked in, and I remembered the buttons were mismatched. I'm from the city and was not that ignorant of society. As I was passing by, he smiled at me and said something in Spanish and held his hand out. I was confused and looked around to see if he was talking to me. When I looked back up at him, he was in front of me, trying to grab my arm and pull me around the building. I threw my arms around in the air in panic and had what felt like a mini wrestling match with this dude. I was scared out of my mind and my heart felt like it was going to jump out of my chest at any second. As I was calling for my grandmother, she had finally realized what was happening and threw her phone down that she was talking on and screamed at me to run. As she started to run towards us, I pushed him and ran back around the corner. As I was running towards anything but him, I saw a big van pull up. It had paint splatters all over it and duct tape all over one window, and there were several Hispanic men sitting inside. The original man by the door tried one more time to get me, and I could feel his fingers trace the back of my shirt. My grandmother was half sprinting, half wobbling fast, even for her age, towards me, and he must have realized it wouldn't happen. He jumped in the van, and I made it to the front of the store with my grandmother there. I was so scared. My grandmother was freaked out too, and never let me walk into a gas station again by myself. Going into Walmart, I would always see posters of young girls missing with the caption, "Have you seen me?" Makes me wonder if there would have been just a slight shift that day to the events, if I would have been one of them.
Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader here. I hope you enjoyed listening through that. If you did, please slap a like, and if you haven't already, why not subscribe to be notified of future uploads? If you have a story you want me to narrate, please send it to my email in the description box. Once again, thanks a lot for listening.